What is going on, everybody? So the ROG Ally is shaping up to be quite the handheld. I recently played Street Fighter 6 on both the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, and there were promising results for both systems, and both have their drawbacks. But I could only capture footage for the ROG Ally, since every time I try to record on the Steam Deck, the game just flat out froze, and the FPS went down to about 30. So for now, enjoy my unedited and modded gameplay on the ROG Ally. But going into both versions, and yes, versions, first and foremost, the Steam Deck held up very well if the resolution is lower than 1080p for the most part. And it's great the Steam Deck has that option to go down to, say, 900p if you're docking the system. And in 900p the game looks great and plays great. But in 1080p, in low settings, Street Fighter 6 on some occasions on the Steam Deck slows down, in World Tour especially, and in about half of the fighting arenas. So it's tough to recommend playing Street Fighter 6 at 1080p on the Steam Deck. But the ROG Ally was made for 1080p, and I'm happy to report, with a mix of low and medium settings, the ROG Ally plays Street Fighter 6 at a pretty much locked 60 FPS when you're just in a standard fighting arena. World Tour mode is very playable as well, but I do recommend putting the resolution down to 900p when you're playing at World Tour in performance mode, because at 1080p sometimes the FPS has random dips to 22 to 25 FPS. But in turbo mode, the performance doubles in World Tour at 1080p, bringing in lows of 30 to 40 FPS. And of course, the Ally has no issues running Street Fighter 6 at 720p, just like the Steam Deck. But for the most part, I play on the ROG Ally at 1080p in performance mode. You can bump it up to turbo mode to turn up certain settings like shadows, bloom, and ambient occlusion, and that's if you want to spoil yourself. Now, getting into the finer details with the Steam Deck version, and yes, it is a specific version for the Steam Deck. Playing Street Fighter 6 on the Steam Deck has some weird quirks to keep it from pushing the hardware too far. It seems you need to compile shaders every time you start up the game. It only takes about 10 to 20 seconds after the first time, which took about a minute. It's a minor inconvenience, but helps in the long run. It's cool to see a specific optimization for the Steam Deck, and I think that technically makes it a Steam Deck version. Street Fighter 6 on the Steam Deck at higher settings is a stuttery mess and simply crashes when trying out anything higher than low settings. World Tour didn't even want to start for me. On ROG Ally, no shader compilations were needed, and if it can't handle the graphic settings, the game simply slows down. On the Steam Deck, for some reason, even at 1080p, a lot of the game for a good amount of time looked blurry. Even after restarting the game, some elements like signs, concrete, characters, clothing, textures were permanently blurry. On the ROG Ally, a lot of those blurry textures cleared up, with the exception of the globe every time you fast travel in World Tour mode. But it seems like both versions have their hitches with World Tour mode, with textures and slowdown, so there's nothing special to report about that. But the Steam Deck version definitely has a lot more stuttering than the Windows 11 version. In bustling areas like with World Tour mode, the same thing happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake, with the village areas stuttering and not loading certain textures for an awkward amount of time. With the ROG Ally, it loads textures pretty quick, only because it's a CPU-intensive game, so with those types of games, the Steam Deck is going to have a lot of issues, and a lot of newer games are CPU intensive, so we might be seeing this more and more on the Steam Deck. But I have to hand it to Valve, they pulled magic out of their butts with Street Fighter 6's performance, similar to how Nintendo is somehow porting Mortal Kombat 1 to the Switch. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I guess if everybody looks like a bunch of blobs, then they could probably hit 60 FPS again. But the ROG Ally can just handle the game better, even though the Steam Deck can handle it too. It's clearly pushing the hardware past its limits. Playing Street Fighter 6 on the Steam Deck reminded me why I wanted a more powerful system and handheld. Shutting off the Steam Deck when it crashed wasn't a great experience. So far, I haven't experienced a crash on the ROG Ally. Compared to the first week of the Steam Deck, this is a miracle. As many great experiences the Steam Deck gave me, it almost equally gave me the same amount of scares and just the most frustrating times I've had on a PC, because it took me some time to understand Linux, and things like this happen where the Steam Deck CPU just cannot handle the game at some points with specific graphic settings. And it doesn't really tell you what are the dangerous graphic settings until you reached it and the game crashes, like Street Fighter 6 did for me. But so far, the Ally hasn't disappointed in any way. But I think later on I figured out why the image was so blurry at 1080p on the Steam Deck. It was because of the resolution scaling. I brought that up and the game was so slow. Bringing that up on the ROG Ally didn't seem to affect the FPS at all in performance mode, and especially in turbo. If I were to pick a handheld to play Street Fighter 6 on, it's gotta be the ROG Ally, simply because it performs better in 1080p, and you have a portable 1080p screen to play it on. Everything just looks better, and it performs more consistently. And the battery lasts about 2 hours with Street Fighter 6, which is more than enough for me. On the Steam Deck, you get about 2 hours as well, mainly because the 60 FPS is needed, and lowering the TDP slows the game down considerably, and there's no variable refresh rate, so if the FPS goes down, the game goes slower, and also apparently becomes a stuttering mess. Also, while playing this, the Steam Deck started heating up considerably, which was also causing extra stuttering. The ROG Ally didn't really have any issues with heat. It stayed at about 70 degrees Celsius, so there was no needless stuttering. The Steam Deck froze during World Tour right after the first tutorial level, and stutters before and after matches. In normal settings at 720p, the game just freezes after the tutorial. I tested multiple resolution and graphic settings, and it seems like the lowest settings specifically work with World Tour mode, so it seems to fix the issue. Regardless of these technical hurdles, Street Fighter 6 plays very well on the Steam Deck for the most part, and it's mostly locked at 60 FPS at 720p, low to medium settings. I mostly played this game at 720p docked and handheld on the Steam Deck, and it performed pretty well. And I could only tolerate World Tour mode in Street Fighter 6. And the ROG Ally either matches that experience or does considerably better in turbo mode at 1080p, medium to normal presets. Considering the ROG Ally has a 1080p, that's a great jump in performance, since the game works spectacularly in 1080p, as you can see in the footage in this video. But playing at 1080p handheld is definitely a transformative experience and lasts a surprising amount of time. When launched directly from Armory Crate, the game works a little better, but only slightly. I think getting Street Fighter 6 on either system will serve you just fine. But to me, the D-pad on the Ally is more comfortable and reliable to play Street Fighter 6 with. The Steam Deck's D-pad and the 720p screen and all that stuttering just makes Street Fighter 6 on the Steam Deck an inferior experience for me. You'll know what I'm talking about when you experience Street Fighter 6 on the ROG Ally yourself. There's just no going back. And there's going to be more updates to further optimize this game for Windows 11. So naturally, the performance for the ROG Ally is going to get better because it's on such a common platform. And the experience on the Steam Deck might be a little wavering because it is Linux and Capcom isn't thinking about that platform first. This has happened with multiple games where the experiences and performance got a lot worse with new updates. And a lot of the times the Steam Deck has gigantic updates for these small titles because they have to redo the shader cache and about half of the game, because for some reason Valve's accountability level is pretty abysmal. A lot of games at first, like with Linus Tech Tips trying out Horizon Zero Dawn, and with later levels just simply not working on the Steam Deck. The same goes for Street Fighter 6. With later levels in World Tour, the game crashes suddenly, and that's something they should just look into, and I've been saying this from day one. It's been a year and change. Valve just doesn't look into games as much as an ordinary development studio does. They look at about half of the game and assume the game's going to play well the whole way through, but it doesn't, and that happens most of the time. So there will be these huge updates for these titles, and I'm not sure which title it was recently, but there was a 45 gigabyte update for this 10-year-old game on the Steam Deck. There's no way that game was still supported or would even need a 45 gigabyte update, but it was mainly because the Steam Deck had to re-usher shader cache in the right places, like with Soldier, Proton 7, and Experimental. But it does this almost every single time I start it up. And with Street Fighter 6, I can just see this happening, where my confidence would fully be in this handheld, and then all of a sudden there's a gigantic update preventing me from playing this title. You know how many times that happened on the ROG Ally in the first 2 weeks? 0, because it doesn't need to re-establish all of these giant chunks of the game just to make it slightly more playable or to fix an update that made it unplayable. In my experience with this game on both platforms, the ROG Ally was just a lot more seamless. Even though you don't have the fancy gaming mode, it doesn't matter. You can still scroll to something and play the game. It just plays. While it's the opposite, with Steam Deck you have this fancy gaming mode and you can get to your content so easily. But a lot of the time, if not most of the time, there's something wrong with the game, even if it's verified. I rather have the former, where the game is just guaranteed to work, but it takes a little longer to get to it. Yes, I'd rather have my game working without the super fancy gaming mode, but here's the fact and the matter. When you have that super fancy gaming mode, if Windows were to make it, there would be certain features that don't work for the gaming mode specifically. So if I were to choose one or the other, I would rather play Street Fighter 6 in desktop mode, where I know it's going to work and I know it has all of the components it needs to run properly. But after playing Street Fighter 6 on both platforms and having all these insane issues on the Steam Deck while starting up just wasn't a good first impression. And it's a little alarming that some people ignore all of these blatant flaws, even after a year. But hey, if the Steam Deck is the only platform you have, then yeah, you should get Street Fighter 6 on the Steam Deck. But if you have a gaming laptop and Street Fighter 6, because of the crazy stuttering and sometimes a lack of optimization altogether, I would say play it on something that's more reliable, especially if you're playing with a party. Because honestly, playing the Steam Deck version with multiple people was a little embarrassing because the game was just freezing for about 20 minutes. And all I did was put the settings up to medium at 720p. But on the ROG Ally, people just keep getting impressed by it. But I freaking digress. After all, this is a video about which one is better to play on, and definitively, because of the 1080p screen, the constant 60 FPS, the fact that you have flexibility when it comes to setting the graphics, and the better D-pad, I think the ROG Ally is a clear win. I'm telling you, when I played it at 1080p, it literally gave me butterflies in my stomach. Now, it's not completely perfect on the ROG Ally. There are some slowdowns and there are some pop-ins, like with the world map and world tour mode. But that's the only thing I can remember. Besides that, the performance is actually stable at 1080p in World Tour mode, and docking it at Turbo mode will get you a vastly better experience. And like I said, for the most part on the Steam Deck, I kept it at a locked 720p, so don't expect anything in terms of higher resolution and good performance if you just want to keep the game at a certain setting and just not mess with them anymore. But besides the actual frustration I had with this title on the Steam Deck, both systems are great. If you have a budget and just want to play Street Fighter 6, the Steam Deck is the obvious choice. But if you want to go all out and get the best performance and you just want to play a game at full resolution without worrying about which update to download and what setting to put at what because your hardware is limited, with ROG Ally, just put it in turbo mode if you don't want to mess with the settings, and the game will most likely work. It's that easy, just one touch of a button, and you don't have to worry about settings anymore. Just plug it in or get a power bank if you don't want to mess with all that. While with the Steam Deck, you have to know which Proton version to use, and if you downloaded the shaders, and if the latest update messed up your game, and you won't have to wonder, hey, I used to have 100 gigabytes internal space. Why when I downloaded these 5 games, I went down to 60? What's going on? Well, welcome to the world of shader cache. But with ROG Ally, when you download a game, oh my goodness, the internal space is exactly how you left it. So yeah, I'm going to be playing Street Fighter 6 on ROG Ally. You guys have your shader cache, have fun with that. But I'll be real, there were a lot of issues while playing this on the Steam Deck specifically. And even while trying to get some screenshots off my Steam Deck, for some reason my Steam Deck was just going slow because it was at 15%. And for some reason when the Steam Deck is at 15%, it's in old timer mode. That doesn't happen on the ROG Ally. You can have that thing in turbo to the last percent. I was playing Marvel Spider-Man with the Spider-Man 2 Symbiote mod and had it in turbo mode going about 70 FPS till the very last percent. So yeah, there were a lot of people complaining about the Steam Deck as well. When you get to about 20 to 15%, your game is either going to crash or play a lot worse. So you would say that you can get an hour and a half on both, but don't forget about the last 20% of the Steam Deck. When that happens, there's going to be a ton of glitches that prevent you from doing anything. So yeah, enough of that real talk. This has been my overview of Street Fighter 6 on both the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck. And if you guys have any questions about either version, don't hesitate to let me know. And please, Steam Deck fans, be kind. I'm just telling you how it is. I've probably been using the Steam Deck more than anyone because I used it to an unhealthy degree. And these are just the small warnings I have for anybody that's going to get one. A realistic consideration of what you're going to get and what kind of performance you're going to get if you're just casually picking up a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a good one. Later.